You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast on which we explore man's obsession with portraying his own prehistory in film. Perhaps as if to hold up a mirror to his own soul. Will he see in its reflection a terrified child or a mutated albino crocodile? I'm Dr. Joshua Lindahl, doing my best to channel Werner Hertzog, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plonk. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study health and disease and human evolution. That totally threw me off.
Yeah, it didn't expect to be sitting here with Werner himself.
No.
I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, paleogeneticist interested in evolution of big cats.
And I'm channeling Werner Hertzog today because we are reviewing the documentary Cave of Forgotten Dreams from 2010. We've never done a documentary as far as I know, and that's been pretty intentional because a documentary doesn't really fit our format. You know, we're looking at the way archaeology and paleontology and prehistory are perceived by the general public. And a documentary is kind of the opposite to that. It is what scientists are trying to tell the public. So, you know, we normally are looking for inaccuracies and stuff like that. But that's not really worth our time in a documentary. We're going to assume that people making a documentary are intentionally trying to get the facts right. This one is a little bit different because Werner Hertzog is a filmmaker and documentarian, but he's not a scientist. And so the vibe of this documentary is very different from most other documentaries that you might see about cave people.
Mm-hmm.
We might have to modify our format a little bit because it is still a generally factual documentary where you can learn about this cave if you want to. But can we summarize the documentary like we would for normal film?
Yeah, I can try. I mean, it's all about Chauvet Cave, which was discovered in 1994, has been sealed for at least 30,000 years. It is, I think, the richest concentration of Paleolithic cave art in the world. I think that's right. And the past nearly 30 plus years, archaeologists and scientists have been studying it because it is incredible. And it's a kind of almost a unique resource to gain insight into the lives of Paleolithic peoples. So the film itself is Werner Hertzog and I think 3 other crew members get kind of special permission to film inside. It is like scientists have learned from mistakes of the past, particularly with places like Lascaux and others too, where open access to them has destroyed the microenvironment inside the cave and led to fungal growth on the walls and obliteration of the paintings for which they're famous. So Chauvet is strictly limited in terms of numbers of people that can go in and out. It's usually just scientists for a few weeks of the year, but Hertzog got access to make this documentary, and it's quite stunning. Just to see the inside is a real kind of treat for non-Chauvet scientists. And Hertzog puts his own spin on things a bit, so it does sort of veer into the surreal at times, which I think makes it pretty interesting. But I mean, the star is clearly the art inside Chauvet, and I think he doesn't really try to explain it particularly. He just lets us enjoy it and occasionally talks to a few, I think, eccentric, even for archaeologists, to let them kind of talk a bit about their thoughts. So yeah, it's really nice. I'd forgotten I'd seen it before. I watched it like in about 2012, I think, and still remember bits of it. Interestingly, the bits that I remember are the epilogue, which is just so bizarre, and the fact that one of the archaeologists that they that they have repeatedly on screen to explain some of the science of Chauvet used to be a juggler in the circus. And that also stuck with me. But yeah, it's a really interesting look at somewhere where you won't really get a chance to see in the flesh. I think now, he talks about it in film, but I think it's now open. There is a kind of 1-to-1 scale replica of the cave that's now a kind of visitor center in the Pont d'Arc that people can go to. And depending on how you feel about replicas and whether they provide the same kind of emotional stimulus as the real thing, but that's as close as almost anyone's going to be able to get now that they've kind of sealed off the cave and don't allow very many people in.
Yeah, I think it's best to preserve it.
Well, normally we'd start off by talking about inaccuracies. Certainly there are some, either intentional or because time moves on. I think the obvious thing is that when they made this, they say this cave contains by far the oldest cave paintings dating back some 32,000 years. I think there's even in the documentary itself a little bit of ambiguity about the actual dating, and I think that's, maybe intentional because the actual dates don't matter. 32,000 years or 37,000 years is so big that the average person, 5,000 years difference doesn't make a difference, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, this was the oldest known cave paintings by a wide margin. But since then, we have found much, much older cave paintings, right?
Yes, much older, like more than double.
Yeah. So in 2021, all these much older ones are coming from like Indonesia, right? And so in 2021, there was a paper, oldest cave art found in Sulawesi, which found, that's the famous one that looks like a pig. It's a picture of a pig, dated to 45-ish thousand years old, which is at least 10,000 years older than the date that they say at the beginning of this documentary. But then just 2 months ago, as we are recording this, less than 2 months ago, published in January 21st, 2026, rock art from at least 67,800 years ago in Sulawesi. And I think these are not hand prints, but negative hand, what do you call them? Where you spray paint on your silhouettes, yeah. So 67,000 years old is about twice as old as Chauvet. So that's pretty astounding. And also 67,000 in Southeast Asia is pushing back that sort of out of Africa wave of human expansion, unless these weren't made by modern humans, I guess.
Hobbits, perhaps, on a day trip from Flores. But I think even in Europe as well, there's now a push to recognize that some Neanderthals made art, like it's in Gibraltar. They've suggested that there's kind of abstract hashtag images. Where is that?
The one I remember, and this is already getting back a few years, is on some stalactites. And I think they're supposed to be like seals, but when you look from a distance, it kind of looks superficially like a DNA strand. Is that the one you're thinking of?
No, I'm thinking of ones that look like a hashtag.
A hashtag.
I think that is Gibraltar.
Okay. And so if there are Neanderthals making them, then they must be at least 40-odd thousand years ago, because that's when Neanderthals go extinct. So I guess even since this film was made, there's earlier dates in Europe for cave art. Not figurative, but abstract.
That's possibly another inaccuracy in this documentary is the one of the experts they interview outside of the site, Cunard. Is it Nicholas Cunard? He says Neanderthals, although they were very sophisticated, they never have this kind of symbolic artifact ever. And in 2010, 2010 is a real turning point in paleoanthropology, because that's huge. The year they published the draft sequence of the Neanderthal genome, and like the whole paradigm flips, right? And so in 2010, certainly I don't think that there was any confirmed Neanderthal art. Now there is a fair bit, but it's never anything like the cave paintings.
Yeah.
Not like the ones in Upper Paleolithic Europe, and not like these ones we're finding in Indonesia these days. So some paintings are now suggested to be Neanderthals. I think that's pretty tenuous. We have the interesting evidence is the feathers and talons, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah, that seems solid.
But it's evidence that they were harvesting feathers and talons from eagles and crows, but not evidence of exactly what they were doing. And I think it's pretty reasonable to think they were doing something symbolic with them.
Yeah, aesthetic, right?
Yeah, but you could be using those for some sort of tool, right? Because you can use, talons are sharp. Maybe they're using them for scratching or poking something. Feathers, you can make, you can put feathers on your spears or something, but like not eagle feathers. You'd find better feathers that are easier to find for that. So I think it's pretty reasonable to think they're doing something aesthetic with them.
Mm-hmm. But, and also, we don't see portable art in the same way that Upper Paleolithic has as well. So there's not library sculptures or bone sculptures in the same way that modern humans have, like of mammoths and cave lions and stuff. So yeah, Neanderthals different, but not that different.
Mm-hmm. There's one piece of alleged Neanderthal portable art in the form of a piece of flint with a bone stuck through a hole in it that kind of looks like a face, and I have not heard anything new about that in like 20 years, and so I always put that on my slides like this is one thing, but I haven't even looked into what people think about that, and it's probably pareidolia, like it kind of looks like a face, but who knows if they made it intentionally to look like a face,
Right.
We do have pieces of possibly symbolic portable objects, because one of the sites where I work, Pešturina Cave in Serbia, has a cave bear bone. I think it's a cave bear patella, possibly, that has a series of parallel incisions on it, which they've studied pretty intensively. And it's like securely from a layer with Neanderthal remains, right?
Interesting.
But like a series of parallel incisions is like pretty far from art. And so like, maybe it's like a counting system, or maybe somebody was just like idly scratching a bone because they were bored. It's almost impossible to know exactly what was going on.
Could be part of a game, like a dice type of idea.
Oh yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Tic-tac, knee bone.
Another thing you mentioned is the Neanderthal extinction. And so one of the things they talk about is at the time of Chauvet, they say Neanderthals are still alive in this region, and there's a push and pull of populations. But we have revised the Neanderthal extinction by now. So Ross, I should know this better than you, but I feel like you know it better than me. What are our dates for Neanderthal extinction at this point?
So I think it was at one point, it was, I think, 40 to 42. I think it's now 42 to 44. So,
oh wow,
about that. Yeah. So they definitely, by the time that the Chauvet was being made, they'd probably been extinct for maybe 10,000 years.
Mm-hmm. There would have been a push and pull like that. And that's when we're looking at, we call it the Middle to Upper Paleolithic transition, because the Neanderthals are associated with a culture we call Middle Paleolithic, and then modern humans are associated with Upper Paleolithic. And there definitely would have been this push and pull as modern humans move into Europe. And at our sites in Serbia, that's exactly what we're studying, is that transition. And the way we think that it mostly worked is in canyons and valleys, just like we have at Chauvet. Like our sites are in canyons just like this. And so the modern humans are moving in along rivers, and they're using these canyons to travel through mountain ranges. And they're moving, they regardless of whether the Neanderthals were extinct by the time we have the paintings at Chauvet, when modern humans were moving in, they would have been moving into territories occupied by Neanderthals. And modern humans are following these rivers. And so what happens is, as the modern humans are moving in, the Neanderthals are receding, at least in the Balkans where we're studying, it seems like the Neanderthals are receding to the highlands. So the modern humans are following the rivers, and they're pushing Neanderthals into more peripheral spaces. And so there would have been a period of time where their populations overlapped, and they would have had this sort of push and pull. And so, that description is still very reasonable, if possibly not at the exact time Chauvet Cave was painted, because the Neanderthals might have been already extinct by then.
Mm-hmm. I've a long history been interested in Chauvet Cave because it is one of I think it is the highest concentration of felid art from the Ice Age.
The fossils are so cool.
Lots and lots of lions, cave lions there.
Mm-hmm.
There's also like one of the only undisputed images of a leopard from the Pleistocene in there.
That's what they said in the documentary, so that's still true?
Yeah, that's still true. Though it is quite hard to say, because they also claim that there's an image of a spotted hyena there, and hyenas are very rare in the cave art record. But it also looks like it's just a bear that's had dots put on it. So it could. This is one of the problems with Paleolithic art, is it's very difficult sometimes to interpret things. Often with the cave lines, it's fairly clear. There's such good renderings of the animals that you can tell immediately what they are. And the leopard that they have there, I'm fairly convinced that is a leopard rather than some other kind of cat that's just had spots put on it. I mean, there were definitely leopards around at that time. Why wouldn't they have drawn it? But yeah, and they talk about this a bit in the documentary, is that the lions there in Chauvet, more than any other cave site, tell us about the biology of the cave lions at the time. So there's one very famous image which the archaeologist talks about in the cave, which is of two lions side by side. Now, I stupidly didn't put subtitles on, so I thought this was just a Hertzog thing, that they would not provide dubbing or subtitles for the people that were speaking in French and German, but I just had forgotten to put subtitles on, so I missed some of that. But this image of two lions are side by side, and there's a larger one which is kind of down on its forepaws, and it has a visible scrotum, so it's clearly a male. And the smaller one beside it is on all fours. It doesn't have a visible scrotum. And so this is a behavior that you see in lions today, like a courtship behavior. That's how male and female lions kind of initiate mating. But it's interesting as well, is that of all the images they have of lions, cave lions in the cave, none of them have manes. Like there are no manes on lions in Paleolithic art in Europe. And so that sort of suggests quite strongly that cave lions didn't have a mane. That is something that you only find in the modern lion lineage, which is pretty cool. But also from the art as well, we can see that the lions are often in groups of multiple individuals, in the same way that the horses are and the bison are. They're essentially showing kind of living behavior. So prides or packs. So we have like prides of cave lions. We have what's the plural for horses? A herd of horses, a herd of bison. But we have like fairly individual rhinos. Like there's only the only kind of multiple rhinos are of individuals fighting each other, which again is kind of standard behavior for rhinos, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool.
One of the things I always think about, especially for this cave, is if you are learning to draw or paint, if you're learning to do any kind of art, one of the lessons you always learn early on is to always use a reference. Because, you unless you have a real strong experience with something, your memory of it is going to be imperfect. And so if you paint from a reference, you're going to get it more accurate. And so for, like you said, this cave, according to the documentary, has much more predators in its art than other caves do. And so for prey animals, these people were hunting animals. They would be up close with prey animals all the time. They'd know what they look like. They'd have the bodies with them as a reference to study. For the predators, all these lions in this cave, I'm like looking at these paintings and they're very realistic. They look great. And so I'm trying to imagine how these people we're able to study these animals so well. Like, you don't have binoculars, you don't have a camera with a zoom lens. You're not hunting these lions, probably, so you don't have a dead one up close. Like, I'm sure you find a dead one occasionally, but it's like, how did these people know these animals so well to be able to draw them like this? And I'm just trying to get into the mind and the behaviors of these peoples. Like, they must have been up close with these lions. They must have been watching them. And that's, I don't know, something to think about, hey?
Also, I think an immense amount of practicing and drawing and grasping those shapes, like drawing from memory, which takes a lot, right? So what we're seeing, what we find for cave art, when we find things that are this well done, you can assume that there's what they say, 10,000 hours of practice beforehand, right? And we don't have the evidence for that. I mean, it could be on dirt with a stick, right? In the dirt with a stick or something to practice.
Well, there are sites where they've got like little stones or slates where they've done kind of just lots of outlines, and it's almost like they're kind of sketch pad. But yeah, these guys are, like Kim says, these guys are definitely experts. And I guess we're also kind of looking at it from a very sort of Western point of view. People live side by side with lions today, in parts of Africa and India. And they are a familiar part of the landscape. They're a dangerous part, but for the most, they just leave each other alone. And there are cultures where there is more interaction. So there's kind of kleptoparasitism of lion kills by humans. There's also evidence from the Palaeolithic of people hunting cave lions and deliberately targeting them for their fur. So there are cut-marked bones which suggest that lions were sort of skinned to make rugs or cloaks or something similar. So yeah, and I think they would have been possibly more familiar with these predators than we might imagine. Particularly, I guess, there's also quite a lot of bears, cave bears drawings in Chauvet, and we know that it was a cave bear hibernation den. There's thousands of cave bear bones in there, and also claw marks, footprints from cave bears, nests dug out of the mud from cave bears, lots of skulls of cave bears, and some of them have been kind of human modified or placed in particularly kind of prominent places. So these guys would definitely have known cave bears as well.
Certainly there is one inaccuracy in this movie at the end in the postscript where it is, if not explicitly stated, very, very heavily implied that there are crocodiles living in France that have mutated and become, they've lost their pigmentation because of a nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
But
he definitely wants us to believe that it's the nuclear power plant that led to them becoming albino, right?
Yeah.
But it's not, I mean, there's albino alligators everywhere. They're not that rare. They're rare, but they're not that rare, right? And then, but what I don't understand is that the greenhouse was a man-made greenhouse. They thought, we have all of this hot water coming off of the nuclear power, let's just do something with it, is what I understood it as. They introduced crocodiles into this contained man-made greenhouse for just human reasons of, let's put these things here. And then he makes this comment like as if they're somehow linked with the cave, and soon albino alligators or crocodiles, whichever the one they were, are going to be living in the cave. And you're like, they're not free. It doesn't, like, I didn't understand any of that. It went way off kilter for me. I thought it was the end of the movie, and I was like, okay. And then I'm like, what?
I didn't even understand the metaphor that he's getting at.
No, I didn't get it.
Are we the albino crocodiles? Are we becoming our own doppelgangers? I didn't follow any of what his point was there.
It almost makes me wonder. I think there's different explanations. One, he was super high and like really saw the universe linked together in a way that we haven't seen, or the people of the alligator park sponsored the filmmaking in some way, and he had to like bring it in.
Yeah.
I think he visited the alligator park, which is nearby, just like as a tourist, while he's like, oh, why don't we check out this alligator park? And he's like, I'm going to take some video of alligators. I'm going to get, or crocodiles. I'm going to get this in the movie somehow.
Shove them in somehow. But he could have just done, oh, and look, and he close by, there's this. Isn't that cool? Like everybody would have been like, that is cool.
Not what the hell are you talking about, you weird German man.
Yeah, you didn't have to make it something deeper than that.
It could also be that because it was so difficult to film inside Chauvet, you just had lots of leftover film and thought, I'll shoot some alligators and somehow tie it in, like you say, do some drugs, and then it'll all make sense.
If I was him and I had to connect these two, like if someone was like, here's this film footage and here's this film footage, make it work together, I would have done, look at how early humans altered the environment in some way. And then look at this random thing that we're doing to alter the environment now. Isn't that crazy? We made albino alligators in France. That would have been way more digestible.
That would have made sense.
Yeah, I get the juxtaposition of the prehistory with, you know, modern and future with the nuclear power plant, right? There is a nuclear power plant not far from, if everything he says is true, which, I mean, I have some quotes from Hertzog about facts and truth, which I want to talk about. But there's a place where I've been in Serbia many times, which is a Roman city on the Danube River, or it was on the Danube River at the time, called Viminacium. And right now it's completely underneath a farmer's field, but it was discovered because on the edge of this field is a coal power plant, and there are coal deposits under the field. So they've been mining the coal to feed the power plant, and discovered a Roman city sort of in the process, I think is how the story goes.
Right.
But it is very interesting to be visiting this ancient Roman city, which is now like an archaeology park, is one of these things they have in Europe, which is such a foreign concept in North America. But it's like an archaeo park, and you can be looking at these ancient Roman ruins and then look up in the distance and there's this huge coal power plant. And so this like juxtaposition of past and present is, you know, you could do something interesting with that. I think that's what he's doing in this film. He's juxtaposing the ancient past with the futuristic nuclear power plant, but then connecting these crocodiles to it, which really have nothing to do with the nuclear power plant, unless it's true that this crocodile park is fed by the warm waters from the nuclear plant, which are just warm from cooling. They're not warm because they're radioactive.
Yeah.
Right?
You'd hope, unless there's a leak.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's something that is, I think, fairly common over here, is that extractive industries, so like mining, stumble upon something old and cool, and then they have to stop and build a park. So the similar one that I'm thinking of, which actually is where I met Nicholas Conard, who's in this film. So we were both at a conference on Homotherium, the saber-toothed cat, which was taking place at Schöningen, which is in Germany, but it started as an open-cast lignite mine, if memory serves. So like lignite is the precursor to coal, so not quite as old as coal, but still burnable and usable as a fuel source. But when they were excavating it, they found spears, so it's some of the oldest wooden implements on the planet. They found lots of horses, lots of saber-toothed remains, and basically a whole Middle Pleistocene environment. And so they've stopped mining that area, and there's now a really excellent museum about the site, and a showcase of some of the artifacts that were recovered from there.
That's one of the things I was going to ask about is, you know, archaeology, paleoanthropology, paleontology are pretty small fields. I was going to ask if any of us had met anybody in this documentary, and Conard, I think, is the only name I really recognized. I'm sure I've read something from Jean-Claude, who is one of the major guys who was running the site before. We can't see any of your books because of your background. Oh, okay, you've got the book by Jean-Claude on the cave art,
And
they've Klotz has written a few papers about Chauvet as well, which are available in the literature.
It was I just appreciated the visuals of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
They really took their time to show everything.
I think that really is the point, right? Because I've never seen cave art in person, because all the sites where I work are caves in Eastern Europe, and there's basically no cave art in Eastern Europe. but there's all this cave art in Western Europe, and everything that I hear about it is like you can't experience it properly from photos of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure that none of us watched this in 3D, but I believe this is the only thing Werner Hertzog ever filmed in 3D. And the point was that if you're experiencing it in 3D, he was skeptical about 3D, but he was convinced by, I think, his cameraman that 3D is going to capture this in a way that is important for this site, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was in cinema for a while.
Presumably
that's where you could see it in 3D. Unfortunately, that wasn't an option on the home DVD version.
Yeah.
Well, I can't see 3D, so it doesn't do me any good.
Well, 3D film, I think, has died off. I think it ended up being a gimmick, just like Werner Herzog thought it was going to be, because I've seen maybe 2 or 3 in my life, and all of those were like 10 years ago at least.
Are they still doing the Avatar ones in 3D?
I don't know. I don't even go to the movies. I just watch them on my big TV at home, so I don't have to go where people are.
Yeah, fair enough.
But they said, at the time, 3D filming was still pretty new, and so, they're limited in like the size of things they can bring into the cave. So they had to get some specially constructed 3D cameras. And the first time they went into the cave, he says in the documentary, on their preliminary walk into the cave, they only had a couple of GoPros. They didn't have their big filming gear, and so in order to get the 3D, they like taped 2 GoPros together.
Wow.
for those initial shots.
Smart.
They also make a big deal about their LED lighting, which I guess was a big deal at the time too, because normally your lights are going to be really hot, and you can't do that in the cave because that's going to change the temperature and change the ecosystem, allow things to grow in there.
Yeah.
So having those cold LED lights was also really important for them to be allowed in there. Ross, you talked about how eccentric the archaeologists are in this film, even for archaeologists, and I was wondering if we have any examples of eccentric archaeologists that we know.
Man. Where to start? Jesus.
I'll start with myself. I, in a former life, while I was an archaeology student, I was also a bicycle courier. That's one of the things that I feel is interesting about my past. But like every archaeologist has some weird previous life, right?
Totally. Certainly the ones that I've met.
Then I'm totally boring because I've just been doing this since undergrad.
Well, I feel like especially paleoarchaeologists, paleoanthropologists have weird backgrounds, I think.
Yeah.
God, now that my mind's just gone blank from trying to think of archaeologists with weird backgrounds, what they've done.
But I'm having trouble thinking of examples too, but it feels true because you said like eccentric even for archaeologists.
Yeah.
I have stories from the field, but I don't want to say them because they involve the names of actual archaeologists.
Yeah, that's
right. Identifiable people. Yeah.
Yeah. There is one archaeologist that told me a story about how he became an archaeologist, and he was just a young student and was somewhere, I don't remember where, it was somewhere, Turkey or something. And he was supposed to go on a tour. You know this person, Ross. And he was supposed to go on a tour, and he got on the wrong bus. Like he thought it was the tour bus, but he got on the wrong bus, and he ended up getting on the bus of an archaeology conference, taking archaeologists to the sites. And so he met all the archaeologists, and now is really a successful person who runs a very impressive lab at a very impressive university. So he just kind of accidentally fell into it. I enjoyed that story.
At the sites where I work, I've known archaeologists who, one of them was, lots of archaeologists sort of overlap with film. There's a lot of people who are interested in both film and archaeology.
All right.
I know one guy who I think he's working mostly as a filmmaker, but he also did a whole bunch of stints working on cruise ships. I know another guy who was an archaeologist, but also taught scuba diving in the Maldives.
Interesting. I know one guy who, before doing archaeology, was a sort of semi-pro tennis player, which is quite an unusual background. Oh God, what else? I do know a guy who was a bear trapper and a fur trapper in Siberia before becoming a paleogeneticist, but he had to give up being a trapper because he was always getting lost. And if you're trapping in the kind of Arctic Circle, there's very few kind of landscape guides, and so that it became dangerous.
You need one of those internal compasses things.
And he didn't have one.
Yeah. There was a PhD student, I never met her, but she's in the lore, that she ended up dropping out of her PhD because she started to write romance novels and made way more money. And so it was just like, why am I doing a PhD? And left.
That's the plot of The Lost City. I think, Ross, you missed that one, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember.
Who did we have on that one? Do we have a guest on that one, or did we all do that one?
I don't know.
With Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum?
Yeah, I did see that one. And did it not? Wasn't it Elijah Wood was the baddie?
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
Or Daniel Radcliffe, one of the two.
But
Daniel Radcliffe, yeah.
I heard this story before that movie came out. This was back in Durham,
right.
So it's not me misremembering, like putting movie plots as real memories, which I do. I'm not saying I don't do that, but this one I know that I did not.
That's also Kathy Reichs, who is a forensic anthropologist who wrote the Temperance Brennan series of novels, which became the TV show Bones.
Yeah.
There's another thing I thought we could talk about. They gloss over this pretty quick, but they mention how the archaeologists are living in a sports complex nearby. And I thought that tracks pretty well with the kind of places where... Sorry, my cat is screeching and biting me. Go away.
Yeah. Where we get shoved when the local government is funding us or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the main site where I work is in a small village in Serbia, and most of the time we just rent people's houses. They'll go away for a vacation in the summer, and we'll just stay in a house. But it went on the years when our team was a lot bigger, we would rent the school, and so we'd just have like cots set up in the classrooms. The best place is there is an artist colony in this village, which is pretty famous in Serbia. So there's an artist who is on the 200 dinar bill who is famous for painting at this artist colony. And it makes sense there's an art colony in this village. It's a tiny little village, like 1,000 people or something like that. But it's, of course, we're in a canyon, just like very similar to what it looks like at Chauvet. And it's a beautiful place for artists to paint landscapes or scenery, right? And so there's this artist colony, which is great because it's got tons of little rooms and it's got, conference areas. And I love staying at this artist colony. So it's, it really tracks to be like, what's the big building we have nearby that we can put a bunch of beds in and have people live here for a few weeks, right?
Yeah.
Last year I stayed essentially at a village's town hall. So like we were up in their office and stuff. And so it was comfortable, like AC and Wi-Fi, and it was good. But then every once in a while, somebody would have to come in and ask if they could use the printer. Because like they're still having to like run the village and town, right?
Oh dear. Yeah. I'm trying to think so I've not done a lot of field work, but I've done field work in New Zealand, and then we got put in like a derelict house and had like sleeping bags and air mattresses. Did field work in Orkney, and we just stayed in someone's house. Did field work in the Yukon, and it was like holiday homes, I think, during the kind of slow season. So, yeah, very much. Where can we put these people that we don't really care about? I know. Whatever spare buildings we have.
All the money, at least in North America, is in CRM, cultural resource management, or, I think they call it heritage archaeology in the UK or something like that. And I did one CRM contract in southern Manitoba for the oil pipeline. So like tons of money, right? We were doing an archaeological assessment before they replaced the existing pipeline because it was reaching its end of its life. And we were in a small town, but we stayed in a hotel. I think it was like a Super 8 or something like that. We each had our own private room. We had something like 8 huge white North American pickup trucks.
Whoa.
Wow.
And so we would drive like with the big extended cabs. So we did go 4 in a pickup truck. We didn't need a pickup truck. We could have driven in a little compact car because we were just driving on, regular country roads that are perfectly drivable. We did have to cross a farmer's field, but like I grew up on a farm. You can drive a car across the field. That's no problem.
Yeah.
But so we filled this hotel. Each of us had our own room. We'd wake up at 7 and pile into these huge white pickup trucks. We'd drive 20 miles to the site. And also got paid a ton of money there. I made as much in 3 months at that site as I would make in a year from like any of my student grants or anything like that during my master's or PhD. So
Holy cow.
Wow.
If you want to be an archaeologist, kids, get into CRM. That's where the money is, but also the work. We worked 12-hour days, and it was like digging with shovels. It was like work faster, we're on a deadline, right? So the work sucked. Well, I mean, I like manual labor. It's fun being outside in a field digging, better than a lot of other jobs you could have. But and then occasionally you find something cool. But if you want to be an archaeologist and make money, the money's in CRM.
I wouldn't survive outside academia. It's just not it's the academia or dying on the streets for me.
I agree.
It's tough out there. It is tough out there.
I don't like people telling me what to do.
I don't like having to do somewhere at a certain
Don't tell me how to
time.
dig. I know how to dig.
Yeah. I don't want to have to be somewhere for 8 hours.
Do you know what I don't like is, I probably shouldn't say this, but the like safety regulations. Working on the pipeline, you have to follow these like safety regulations that are designed for.
Don't tell me not to smoke next to a pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but that's what the rules are like on the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we had to do this like oil company safety training, and one of the questions was, at a safety meeting in the morning, you weren't paying attention and you didn't hear something that the boss said. What should you do? And the options were like, pretend you heard it because your boss will be annoyed if you ask them to repeat themselves. Ask somebody else so that you don't bother your boss, or go ask your boss so that you know what the safety rule was so that you can actually be safe. And I'm like, is this a real question that you actually have to ask like oil field workers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But like I had so much trouble following the stupid safety rules because at the point where the profile was 0.5 meter tall, we had to use a ladder to get in and out, and we had to use 3 points of contact at all times when using a ladder, which means that you can move one arm and 1 foot at a time, but your other 3 points always have to be in contact with the ladder or the ground. And I'm a pretty tall guy. I'm almost 2 meters tall, so I can just step over the edge that's 0.5 meter tall with no trouble, with no, like, I don't even have to jump. I can just take a step. And so I was doing this, and I would get yelled at by the boss across the field, use the ladder. And I'm like, but this... In our sites in Serbia, we have unshored profiles that are 4 meters tall. And I know that's not safe, but like, I can't handle a 0.5 meter profile and all these. I can't do it.
Oh, God. Yeah, different safety cultures. That's it. I mean, in some ways, it's good that you were getting yelled at, because the other option is, you've fallen down a well, but you saw the safety video, therefore it's your own fault, and we're covered. I mean, a lot of the time, it's just to cover them.
That's what makes me so mad. It's not about keeping me safe. It's about liability. You don't want me to. You don't want to lose money when I get hurt, right?
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about this film, like we said, is it does present the true facts about Chauvet. You can really learn about Chauvet, but Werner Hertzog is presenting things in a much more colorful. He's very focused on feelings, how this cave makes you feel, how to like getting into the mind of people in the past. And I thought we could talk a little bit about this. There's a couple of interesting things that he seems to repeat over and over. And one of the things in this movie, he talks about the Manhattan phone book. And I don't know if you read anything from or watch any interviews from him around the time this came out, but he seems obsessed with talking about the Manhattan phone book, right? For all the kids listening, a phone book used to be a book that was full of everybody's phone number and also sometimes their address, which absolutely sounds insane today, that we could just like look up people's names in the phone book and find their phone number. It seems like such a breach of privacy to me today. But his point is that the first time he brings this up is when they're talking about the 3D scan of the cave, where they have 4 million three-dimensional points to reconstruct this cave. And he's talking to archaeologist Julian Money. He says it's like creating the phone directory of Manhattan. 4 million precise entries, but do they dream? Do they cry at night? What are their hopes? What are their families? You will never know from the phone directory. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can still assume they have them.
Yeah, but you can't know what they are, right? And so this is his idea, is the phone book is facts, right? In science, we create facts, but the facts don't tell us basically truths. And I picked up on this because I just taught this lecture in one of my classes about the distinction between truth and fact, which the dictionary definition is the same thing. Like the definition of a fact is something that's true, and the definition of truth is something that's in accordance with facts. And yet we see this distinction between truth and fact come up all over the place. Indiana Jones says it in The Last Crusade in his classroom, right? He says archaeology is about facts, not truth. If you want truth, go to Dr. Tyree's philosophy class down the hall, right? And so I just last week in my class, I had a whole lecture talking about this distinction between truth and facts. And I read an article about Hertzog and this documentary where they quoted him as saying he's more interested in ecstatic truth rather than accountant's truth. And the accountant's truth is the facts, right? Archaeologists discover the facts, those 4 million Cartesian points that make up the 3D scan of the cave. Those are facts, but they don't tell us truth, right? And the truth is the feeling. The truth has a message, right? Facts don't have a message, and you can interpret a message out of facts, but you can interpret many different messages out of facts, right? And so that's the approach that he takes to this documentary, which I think is different from a typical archaeology documentary. A typical archaeology documentary is going to present you facts. They're going to have a message, but their main thing is going to be, here's the facts and here's how you can interpret a message out of it. He's much more interested in getting to a feeling than presenting accurate accountant's facts in this movie. And so I was wondering if we have thoughts on that, because I have lots of thoughts on it. I taught a whole lecture on it last week.
I think he probably felt that he needed to do. It's probably also a large part of his character and personality, right? That he sees this and believes in this. But it's also, I think he was trying to make it a compelling documentary, because there are a lot of facts, but there's not really an in-depth things. It's more like they were able to say the facts pretty concisely in a short amount of time, and then you show the beautiful paintings, and then that would be it if he didn't add this element to it, right? So I think it was probably, now it's all, documentaries now do similar things, but it's more sensationalized, right?
Yeah, it did feel like he had to kind of make it just a little bit weird, because that's his thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the idea of human truths from this, I don't think it really succeeds in that, because he doesn't really try to get into the thoughts and dreams of Paleolithic people, and there's not even very much discussion about what the meanings of these paintings could be, which is a kind of perennial discussion point for any time cave art comes up. Why did they do them? What were their thoughts? What were their motives? And they don't even really touch on that, which seems a bit odd.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Yeah, the biggest stretch of the facts is the albino crocodiles in the nuclear plant at the end, right? Which is basically a blatant lie. because he is, you guys agree, he is basically saying the crocodiles mutated because of the power plant, right?
Yeah.
I'm not reading into that too much. He's pretty much saying that outright. So like that
I think he
is
did
just
say that outright. I think verbatim he said they are albino crocodiles mutated in the waters of the radioactive. Or maybe he didn't say radioactive, he just said nuclear water.
Mm-hmm. So he is, blending fiction with his fact, but with regards to the cave itself, he's really not doing that. And he's, like I said, not even imposing a narrative on the cave. The real thing he's doing is calling attention to how we can never really understand what these people were thinking and feeling, but he is interested in what they're thinking and feeling. And I think it's a very feeling documentary as opposed to more of a fact documentary.
I would be quite interested in a non-archaeological approach, like just somebody whose medium is visual, like Hertzog as a filmmaker. I would be very interested in what his ideas are as to why people would have created this art. The sort of classic explanations are some kind of sympathetic magic or some kind of ritual religion, some kind of cultural meaning as well, sort of stories or sort of historical shamanism kind of the group. There's all these kind of options. I would be very interested in hearing what he would have to say as somebody who's spent their whole life thinking about a visual medium, what cave art says to him. So it does feel a bit of an anticlimax that he doesn't try and do that when he'd be one of the best placed people to.
Yeah, you're right. That's where his strengths could have come in instead of what he did try and do.
You can see that influence a bit because he refers to the caves a few times, I think, as possibly a form of proto-cinema, because one of the things about Chauvet in particular is a lot of these animals are sort of drawn in a sequence, or they have, like, there's a bison with 8 legs. There's the rhino where it sort of has, superimposition before and behind it. And so these things look like they might be done to sort of imitate movement. And so he does talk about how it looks to him and to a lot of other people who have said the same thing, like they're trying to depict movement on the wall, which would be basically a precursor to, cinema or film, right?
Yeah.
And so as a filmmaker, I think he's obviously biased towards seeing that, but like you said, he could expand on that a little more, right?
Yeah. And one of the things that talked about with these, what look like almost like animation cells in the drawings of Chauvet and other places as well, is that you have to remember these places are in the dark. They would have been seen by kind of flickering torchlight. And so that flicker could have added to like a proto-animation. And we know that Paleolithic people were able to, I don't want to say understand, but able to model kind of animation, because there's an example. I've got a paper up by Marc Azima and Florent Rivert about animation in the Paleolithic art. And there's a bone disc from Lagerais-Basset, which is just like a small, round, sort of coin-sized bone disc, but it's got a hole through the middle, and on one side it's got a chamois, so like a wild goat, with its legs out, and on the other side it's got pretty much exactly the same image, but with the legs in. And so this is very clearly thaumatrope. So one of those like kids' toys where you spin it, and the classic one is the bird in the cage, and you spin it and it looks like the bird's in the cage. This is one from the Paleolithic of a running chamois. So these guys understood how to animate, how to make cartoons. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing evidence of that in some of the images from Chauvet and other caves, where you have like what looks like legs animated at different points in the running cycle, or heads animated at different points in a kind of clash between animals. So
yeah, and as you move the torch, it looks like they're moving. Yeah,
totally, like a flip book, except on a cave wall. So it does feel like a missed opportunity that Hertzog didn't go further in depth into that angle.
I think they do try to do that a bit in the film because with their lights in the cave, they're always moving the lights in every shot. Like they're not trying to light the scene bright so that you can see everything clearly. There's no shot where they're not moving their lights. And so I think they're trying to do that. But the problem is that a big LED panel doesn't get the same flickering effect as torchlight or firelight would, right?
Yeah.
Something I was thinking about the whole time is I know that they have a reconstruction of this cave that you can visit, and they have, I think, reconstructions of Lascaux and things like that too. And I'm not sure what it looks like inside those reconstructions, but I was thinking, you can 3D scan this cave, construct this as a video game. Maybe something you could do in VR, right? Because then you can simulate a flickering torch. You could even accentuate it. You could add the ecstatic truth as opposed to the accountant's truth, and you could put some subtle animation on the wall that almost plays with your mind, right? You can experience this in a VR situation with a flickering torchlight where the light is flickering and you can hold the light and move it around, and then in the sort of shadows you can have an animation that accentuates that and almost makes you question your own reality, right? If it's very subtle, that would be something that would be really cool to see.
If you're doing it in VR, you could also take lots of drugs before you did it and explore it in a safe way that you wouldn't be able or allowed to do in the real Chauvet cave. So,
well, you can take drugs before you go to the reconstruction of it, if you want. I don't know what the drug laws are in France, so I'm not going to, for legal reasons, I'm not making this recommendation. But if you happen to be in France and you happen to have some drugs, that is something that you absolutely can do.
And it would be, I feel, in the nature of Paleolithic art. I mean, there is also discussion that some of these are representations of shamanistic, spiritual drug journeys that people might have taken from the past. So, and
Jean-Claude was sort of interested in this idea of shamanism, right? I haven't read a lot that he's written, but I believe he's written about how these were something to do with shamanism, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, what are our final thoughts about this documentary? I liked it. It was pretty good.
I liked it. It just went off base at the alligator thing.
Yeah,
I enjoyed seeing the alligators. Like, I have no protest against them being added. I just don't understand the storyline.
But also, if I'm watching a Hertzog documentary, it needs to get a little weird. I was expecting weirdness, and so I don't think it's worse for being a little weird at the end.
Yeah. And he doesn't mention it, but I'm sure that those crocodiles or gators, whatever they are, nobody has hundreds of crocodiles for no reason. They must be getting turned into leather goods. That sounds like a very French solution to excess heated water from their nuclear power plants. They've turned it into a greenhouse crocodile farm to sell high-end leather to Yves Saint Laurent or somebody.
I was trying to look into this. I think so. He talked about a biosphere. There is what they call it a biosphere at the Rhone River Delta, which is basically sort of like a nature preserve. But this crocodile farm, I think it's also on the Rhone River, but I think it's separate from the biopreserve. I think this is just a tourist thing. It has crocodiles, but many other reptiles and birds. And I think this is just a tourist crocodile farm.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes me feel better. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I would, like him, I didn't love the epilogue. But if you stop watching it before the epilogue, the star is the cave. And the kind of images inside are so stunning and so incredible that, really anyone could have done it and it would still be just as impressive. It doesn't have to be Hertzog, but he does add a little bit of weirdness. And he manages to find some similar eccentrics to talk about it. So, like the archaeologist that used to be in the circus, and the guy who's a very bad spear thrower. We didn't talk about him. But
yeah, I wanted to mention that too. He kind of throws him under the bus. He's practicing his spear throwing, and then Hertzog comes on in the voiceover. He's like, it doesn't look very impressive when he does it, but it would have been formidable when the prehistoric people did it.
Yeah.
It is really hard, though, to use that.
Yeah.
It's hard to even pierce cardboard. Yeah.
It's unnecessary, but yeah, it was. He took it in good grace. I appreciated that the guy didn't storm off in a huff after having his spear throwing criticized by a German documentarian.
So we also didn't mention the perfumer who searches for caves by smelling.
Yeah,
that was quite incredible. But we never got a kind of answer as to whether he managed to make a Chauvet perfume.
Well, I don't know. I've been to caves
that smelled of dead animals.
Yeah.
Although I do know, and I saw this a few years back, they did create a Neanderthal fragrance. I don't know if you guys have seen this.
No.
And the only thing I remember is, I don't know what it was supposed to smell of, but the bottle came in a really beautiful porcelain replica of a biface. So they'd got a professional flint knapper to make a large biface axe, and then they kind of molded that and cast it in porcelain as the bottle for this Neanderthal perfume. I'll have to look that up because that was pretty cool.
Wow. I'm looking it up. It looks pretty cool.
It's very earthy tones, I'm guessing.
With a slight hint of BO, yeah.
135 euros. That's too much for me. I don't wear fragrances, but I can't afford that.
It is a lovely bottle, though.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the episode, but this documentary was requested by a listener, Phil, in Australia. So thanks for emailing us. Thanks for listening. If you want us to cover something we haven't covered yet, please feel free, send us an email, leave us a message on social media, Blue Sky or Facebook. Kim, if you ever check the Facebook. But
we don't have anything.
If you send us a request and it doesn't end up in the spam folder, then we will put it on our list. So thanks for listening, Phil, and thanks to everyone else for listening, and send us an email with your requests. Do you have questions, comments, or movie requests? We want to hear from you. Find us on Blue Sky and Facebook at SOTSA Podcast. Send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com or visit our website at screensofthestoneage.com.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
That cat's tail is very curvy.
Yeah, it's the street cats here. Most of them have kink tails. Some even have twirly tails. I think just from the inbreeding on the island.
Like Florida panthers.
She's a new rescue, so she doesn't know the Zoom protocol.